Well, it is almost spring. The calendar says it is. The reality is kind of struggling a little bit, but it's warm enough, thank goodness, that we're in Victoria Park, which is a great focal point here in downtown Regina for a very special edition of Currie's Corner. And I'm standing by the cenotaph, which was built after World War I, and it's an event in World War I that we are talking about today on Currie's Corner. We are here at the War Memorial in Victoria Park, which was built after World War I, which is appropriate because today we're talking about Vimy Ridge, the Battle of Vimy Ridge, which commemoration is coming up this Saturday, April the 9th, and it was Easter Sunday, April 9th, 1917, that just under 3,600 Canadians died in the Battle of Vimy Ridge. And with me, Kirk Kelln, who's involved with cadets locally,
Yep.
and ceremony coming up on Saturday to commemorate the battle, and two members of the Cadet Corps, and Nick Gordon and Noah Hepworth. Have I got that right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Kirk, let me start with you. Tell us what the cadets are doing to commemorate.
Yeah, we've actually got quite of a full day planned here. And I'll just mention off the top, we've kind of got two sides to this. We've got a side that's for the general public, and then we have a side that is mostly for the cadets. And we've been focusing on education, commemoration, and celebration. And what we're starting out with is we're going over to the Regina Public Library. The film theater has been a partner of ours right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. We're going to be watching a movie called Vimy Ridge, Heaven to Hell. I don't think the title's very good, although some people like it, but I've seen the movie in advance, and it is a really good documentary. They kind of start out, and they basically got a special warrant to do a small archaeological dig at a part of the battlefield. And as they dig down, they of course uncover artifacts, and then they flash back and take us back in time to how these artifacts were involved in the war. And it's really, they managed to tell the whole story that way. Coming out of that, everybody's going to have an opportunity to see a temporary exhibit that's going to be housed right at the library there. Several people in Regina have local connections to the battle, and we've got a rather an interesting assortment of seldom seen World War I artifacts that our cadets and guests and the general public will be able to see. Following that, we've got a small service it'll take place at about 3:15 right here at the cenotaph. It's going to, there's going to be a laying of the wreath and what you'd expect from such a service to remember the fallen. And after that, we're going to be proud as peacocks. The cadets, along with some CF members and veterans, are going to be parading in kind of a big C all around the park here, and then ultimately ending up back at the Legion Hall, where we're going to go in and have some dinner and just enjoy the company of the veterans and the forces members. Yeah. Just an opportunity for everybody to kind of bond, really.
Wow. Does this happen every year?
Well, actually, this is our first time. We're hoping that this becomes an annual thing. And I don't recall when, but this has, the federal government did make this Vimy Day an official day.
Probably 4 years ago on the 90th anniversary, I would think.
It could be, and I should be the guy that knows, but honestly, I actually kind of brought into this. I'm new, and I was just fascinated when I found out about this story. The more I learned, the more I couldn't believe just how important this was in Canadian history.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Nick, tell us what got you involved in cadets? What got you interested?
Well, I was walking along the street one day, and I found a pamphlet for air cadets. And so I thought I looked further into it and found out there's other types of cadets. And I thought Army cadets would be the best because I was thinking of joining the Army.
Okay. Noah, how about you? What got you interested?
Well, my dad, he was a cadet when he was a kid, and he always told me about how much he really liked what they did. And another friend of mine at school, he was a cadet, and he told me about it. So when I turned 12, my dad took me down to the armories, and we just found more out about it.
And the uniforms are great, right? This has got to be part of the appeal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Take a lot of work to maintain.
Right. Okay, so you've learned a few things doing that?
Yeah, learning how to polish, which we need, and ironing.
Yeah. You can see your face in those boots, I would say. Almost.
Almost.
Anyway, good stuff. All right. Now, the senior cadet we're talking about was yourself. How many years ago?
Oh, that's more than I care to admit. I think it was circa 1982, if memory serves, when I joined up. So, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was really enjoyable. We had a lot of fun. The cadet program has changed a fair bit over that time in some ways. In other ways, it's very similar. But the emphasis today has become much more about adventure training. So basically hands-on. Get the kids up, get them moving, get them doing things. Also practical skill acquirement and leadership training, really. The idea is to get the kids involved very early on in a hands-on way with other cadets in a leadership capacity, because doing is learning. And so I think the program has been really very well structured, and the proof's in the pudding. The cadets keep coming back, and they really have a great time.
Mm-hmm. What kind of numbers do we have?
Well, right now I think we're at about I got getting the official number here. What is that?
We got numbers. It looks like
8, I think.
30.
All right. Maybe it was 40.
Just shout it out.
35.
35.
Sorry about that. Also something I should probably know. But I'll mention that these two fine fellas here are with the 2370. And we meet on Thursday nights. And there's another great corps in town here with a fine and long history, and that's the 155. They're affiliated with the Royal Regina Rifles. Great outfit, and they come together on Tuesdays. So the big difference between the two groups really has to do with accessibility for what times we meet. So, yeah.
Okay. Nick, tell us what happens at your meetings.
Well, first we start off with opening parade, and after that we head to our classes. Then after about an hour or so, 2 hours in classes, we go to final parade, and that takes about 15 minutes or so for opening and final parade.
Yeah. In the classes, what are you learning?
We're learning about mapping, compassing, all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. It's very neat how everything works in cadets.
Yeah, good deal. Now, it's interesting. I mean, some of the people who are commemorated on this monument, I'm sure you mentioned the Regina Rifles. They were involved, I believe, at Vimy Ridge, were they not?
They were. The forces went through a lot of reorganization, and I cannot recall, and I had looked at a lot of this material, whether the Rifles were actually a formation that was part or not, but certainly there were a lot of fellas from Saskatchewan involved. Yeah. As part of our service, we had the cadets undertake a mission of discovery, where they kind of worked to find names of people that had, from Saskatchewan, that had died in the Battle of Vimy Ridge. And the final number that we came to, I think, was 341. So it certainly, although it was a great victory, it came at a terrible cost. And
wow, boy, I mean, you consider in almost 9 years in Afghanistan, the death toll is like 155, and here in one day, from one province, over 300.
Yeah, I mean, the times are different. I suppose the kinds of conflicts that we have now, they're bad too. I mean, there's just no good way to look at war. Mm-hmm. But the reality is that we have managed to we're in a time and place where the impact of war is considerably less than it was for the generations that came before us. And in my opinion, that's because of the sacrifice the generations before us made. They paid a heavy price to put the institutions in place and to keep them safe that protect our freedom. And that's one of the reasons that we have a relatively, peaceful world today, relatively.
Right. My guest is Kirk Kelln, and we're talking about Vimy Ridge, the Battle of, which happened 94 years ago this Saturday. And I did a quick look at some facts and figures, actually, just before we came over here. And 3,598 killed, just under 3,600.
Yeah.
And the total is actually, when you read about World War I, the total of casualties was dramatically higher than World War II, even though the time period covered was less.
Right. Yeah. It was, I've never been to war, and I count my blessings for that, and I hope that none of our kids ever have to go to war. But in my reading of the accounts, it was positively terrible business. The First World War, in fact, as a result of some of the things that happened in the First World War, that led to a whole series of conventions that were in large measure honored even through the terrible times of the Second World War, because it left a mark on the people that they never wanted to see that kind of stuff happen again. And So yeah, the number of people that perished and the ways in which they perished in that war are really terrible. And I think that an important reason to keep coming back to these things and to make sure that we recognize both what was lost and what was won in these battles is if we as a people lose track of these things, I really feel like it's more likely we'll find our way back to them. So it's important to keep them in our minds so that we can avoid those outcomes in the future. You know?
So it sounds like a variation of a very familiar saying, which is if you don't learn the lessons of history, you're doomed to relive
There
them.
you go. There you go. I mean, that's my opinion anyway, but I think it's true.
Yeah. All right. Okay, so the cadets are going to be involved on this commemoration.